You are 400 feet below the Atlantic. A nuclear reactor hums 30 meters from where your crew sleeps. No sunlight, no evacuation, no surfacing for 70 days. You are responsible for 155 sailors and 24 nuclear missiles. One wrong call and there is no rescue. The submarine was never originally designed for you. I have stood watch in that world, so here is what no one asks. How do you sleep, hold command, and keep 150 people alive when every inch of the boat was built before you were ever allowed aboard? A modern Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine carries between 130 and 155 people on any given patrol. That is a small town's worth of lives packed into a vessel barely 13 meters across, sealed off from the world for up to 70 days at a time. There is no fresh air, no sunlight, and no way out until the patrol ends. Between the forward berthing and the nuclear reactor, you might have 30 meters, less than the length of a city bus, separating where you sleep from the core that powers everything. The hum of the machinery becomes background noise, a constant reminder that every system is running because it has to be. There are no backup plans if something fails at depth. Every inch of space is spoken for. Racks are stacked 3 high, with barely enough room to sit up. You learn to sleep with the vibration of coolant pumps and the awareness that a containment breach, a fire, or a systems failure is not just a technical problem, it is a test of your ability to hold the line under pressure. The crew moves through narrow passageways, sharing air that is filtered and recycled hundreds of times. The only separation between you and the reactor is a shielding bulkhead and protocol. I have stood watch in those compartments, and it is not the technical specs that get to you. It is the knowledge that there is no rescue coming. If something goes wrong, the solution is on board, or it does not exist. That is the reality of command here. The responsibility for lives for the reactor, and for the arsenal the boat carries, all compressed into a single, inescapable environment. Until 2010, U.S. Navy policy kept submarines as the last bastion of single-gender military service. The official line cited habitability constraints, but the real issue was intimacy. Submarines are not just tight, they are personal. In a way, surface ships rarely are. Every bunk or rack is precious real estate. On patrol, the practice of hot racking, with 3 sailors rotating through 2 bunks, meant people slept where someone else had just been, sharing warmth, sweat, and the faint trace of their cologne or shampoo. The berthing bays were open with no partitions or privacy beyond a thin curtain and a locker the size of a carry-on bag. Heads and showers were communal, with schedules posted on a whiteboard and enforced by the chief of the watch. Surface ships had already integrated women, but the submarine's forced proximity made the question of privacy unavoidable. Navy memos from the late 2000s make it clear, retrofitting a submarine is not like adding a new bathroom at home. Every partition, every lockable door, every extra bunk costs space that would otherwise hold food, spares, or emergency gear. Surveys conducted before the policy change showed both skepticism and support, but the operational bottom line was simple. If the job required it, the boat would adapt. In April 2010, the ban was lifted. By late 2011, the first female officers reported to Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines, stepping into a world where the only way to make room for privacy was to carve it out of something else. The intimacy of hot racking and open bays had to be rethought. That decision set off a chain of engineering and cultural changes, forcing the Navy to confront not only how space is divided, but what it means to share it for months at a time, with no escape except the end of patrol. When the Navy opened submarine service to women, the technical response was not just policy. Every compartment had to be remeasured and every inch of steel reconsidered. The Ohio class was never designed for privacy. Retrofitting began with partitioned berthing. Steel bulkheads, fire-rated and gasketed, split the old open bays into gender-segregated compartments. Each partition cost the crew about 5% of their usable floor space. That might sound minor until you are living with it for 70 days, hunting for a place to store your boots, or squeezing past another sailor in a passageway narrowed by the new walls. Heads, the submarine word for toilets, were split and rebuilt too. Where two sailors once shared a single cubicle, the retrofit forced a divide with lockable doors, privacy curtains, and extra plumbing, but with a 10% reduction in head capacity. Fewer people could shower or use the toilet at once, and the schedule got even tighter. Every modification added weight, 2 tons across the boat by the last yard estimate, eating into the margin reserved for spares and food. Lockable doors were wired into the combat control system with keycard access to keep the gender zones secure. Even a simple door becomes a technical challenge on a submarine. Fire safety, electrical integration, and escape routes all had to be remapped. The cost was not just in steel and labor. Every cubic meter given to privacy came out of storage, endurance, or operational flexibility. I remember the habitability engineer, a lifer from NavSea, shaking his head over the trade-offs. He said, "Space is the only currency down here. And on a patrol, you feel every inch that is lost." Watch cycles on a ballistic missile submarine are not designed for comfort. The traditional schedule, 6 hours on duty and 12 hours off, sounds reasonable until you realize how quickly the absence of daylight and the constant hum of the reactor start to erode your sense of time. Some boats have trialed a 4 hours on and 8 hours off schedule to better match the body's natural rhythm. But the operational reality rarely lines up with theory. On patrol, the average sailor gets 5 to 6 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period. That sleep is never uninterrupted. Even in your rack, you are always half aware of the next alarm, the next drill, or the next round of footsteps in the passageway. I have stood watch in those hours when the body wants to shut down. After about 36 hours with fragmented rest, you feel the difference. Reaction times slow, judgment gets fuzzy, and decisions that should be automatic start to require conscious effort. The Defense Technical Information Center ran trials on these watch patterns and found clear declines in cognitive performance after a day and a half of cumulative fatigue. On a boat carrying nuclear weapons, that margin matters. There is no backup crew waiting in the wings. Every captain, male or female, learns quickly that managing fatigue is as much a part of command as managing reactor power. The discipline to enforce rest, even when the mission tempo is high, is not just good leadership. It is a matter of operational safety. A rack on an Ohio-class submarine measures just over 2 meters long and 60 centimeters wide. That's barely enough for most adults to stretch out, and there is no room to sit upright. Your world, for hours at a time, is the thin rectangle of that bunk, canvas stretched across a metal frame, a privacy curtain that muffles nothing, and a storage cubby the size of a shoebox. Even the best nights, the air feels thick with recycled breath and the ever-present hum of machinery. Crew berthing sits right above the main propulsion plant, so the sound never stops. 80 to 85 decibels measured at the pillow means sleep comes with a vibration in your chest and a ringing in your ears. I've tried earplugs, but they only dull the edge. The noise is a constant companion. And after a few days, you stop noticing it, until you step ashore and realize what silence feels like. For a female captain, these are not abstract numbers. They are the background to every decision, every hour of rest, every conversation whispered through thin curtains. Privacy is not a door you can close. It's a negotiation with your surroundings, with 150 other people, and with the part of yourself that adapts to living in a space measured in centimeters and decibels. Water discipline is non-negotiable on an Ohio-class patrol. The reverse osmosis plant produces 500 liters of fresh water every day, just enough for drinking, cooking, and the bare minimum of hygiene for 150 people. Showers are strictly rationed 3 minutes per person every 72 hours, enforced by a whiteboard schedule and a timer that cuts the flow automatically. There is no such thing as a long, hot shower. You learn to plan every rinse, every shave, every bit of laundry around the cycle. Most people underestimate this part. The reality is you feel it in your skin long before you notice it in the logbook. Food follows its own strict rhythm. The first 10 to 14 days, the crew eats fresh produce, eggs, and dairy, stacked from floor to ceiling in the galley's cold lockers. After that, it is frozen and canned rations for the rest of the patrol. Meals are the anchors of the day. Breakfast at 6 a.m., lunch at noon, dinner at 6 p.m., no matter what is happening outside the hull. Each sailor gets about 3,000 calories a day, and the menu is planned to the gram. On a long patrol, the cook's creativity becomes as important as the reactor's reliability. The cadence of water and food is not just logistics. It is professionalism, routine, and a quiet form of leadership that holds the crew together when the days start to blur. Authority on a submarine isn't about barking orders from behind a desk. In these passageways, your voice carries through steel and machinery, reaching crew who might be just meters away or wedged into a control console. A captain's presence is measured not by volume, but by clarity and steadiness. You learn quickly that proximity is a double-edged sword. There is no distance from your crew, no buffer for indecision or uncertainty. Every word, every correction is delivered face to face, often in the same cramped compartment where you will later share a meal or a midnight coffee. In 2014, the Navy formalized mentorship for women in submarines, pairing junior officers with seasoned mentors, many of them veterans from surface ships. That network became a lifeline, especially for those stepping into command roles for the first time. I have watched a new officer's confidence grow after a tough watch, guided by a mentor who has seen a dozen patrols and knows how to spot fatigue before it becomes a problem. One captain described her first patrol as a test not of technical skill, but of psychological endurance, navigating a world where every decision is overheard, every mistake is witnessed, and respect is earned in real time. She told me, "You can't fake competence in here. The crew knows who they trust before you ever stand in the control room." That is the reality of command in close quarters. Leadership is not a title. It is the sum of every interaction, every watch, every silent nod in a narrow corridor. Doubt lingered in the early years. Surveys circulated through the fleet in 2012 showed that 78% of male submariners felt either neutral or supportive about women joining their crews. Only 15% voiced concerns, mostly about habitability and routine disruption. The numbers weren't perfect, but they were a far cry from the resistance predicted by skeptics. By 2024, women made up just under 9% of all U.S. submarine officers, a small but steady presence with a retention rate of 84%. That figure stands close to the 88% average for the entire force. In the Royal Navy, the numbers track a similar line, 7% female officers with no measurable drop-off in retention after the first few years. Official policy leaves no room for ambiguity. The U.S. Navy directive states that assignments to submarines shall be based solely on professional qualifications, performance, and mission requirements irrespective of gender. The Royal Navy echoes this in its Submarine Equality Charter. Over a decade, the novelty faded. Training manuals and internal bulletins stopped singling out gender. What mattered was competence, not headlines. I have watched that shift from the inside. At first, every female officer's arrival was news. Now it is just another change of watch. That normalization, measured in surveys and retention statistics, is the real sign of progress, quiet, statistical, and anchored in policy, not publicity. Norway took the first official step in 1995, opening its Ula-class diesel-electric submarines to female sailors. While Norway never operated ballistic missile submarines, the early integration on attack boats set a precedent across NATO. Canada followed in 2010, lifting its own ban and assigning women to Victoria-class submarines the next year, 2011. Like Norway, Canada's fleet remains limited to diesel-electric boats, but the operational lessons, including partitioned berthing, revised watch schedules, and privacy protocols, echoed in allied navies. The United Kingdom made its move in 2011, removing gender restrictions for submarines and assigning the first female officer to a Vanguard-class ballistic missile submarine in 2012. It would take another 12 years before Commander Emma Cox became the Royal Navy's first female ballistic missile submarine captain in late 2024. Argentina, working with the TR-1700 class since 2015, allowed women to serve on board, but like Norway and Canada, has no ballistic missile submarine force. The path is not uniform, but the challenges of privacy, endurance, and leadership are shared across navies. A ballistic missile submarine is the most expensive, most consequential piece of military real estate any captain can command. An Ohio-class SSBN carries 24 Trident II D5 missiles. Each missile is capable of delivering multiple independently targetable warheads to targets over 7,000 nautical miles away. In the British Vanguard class, the number drops to 16 tubes, but the destructive potential remains almost beyond calculation. The cost of a single Ohio-class boat, including its reactor and missile compartment, exceeds $4.5 billion over its service life. That figure doesn't include the price of each missile, the warheads, or the decades of training and maintenance that keep the system running. Every day underway, the boat and its crew represent a moving fraction of the nation's nuclear deterrent, which the Navy calls the Continuous at Sea Deterrent, CASD. At any given moment, at least one submarine is on patrol, guaranteeing the ability to respond if the unthinkable ever happens. Yet the paradox is always present. 150 people, living elbow to elbow, wield the power to alter the fate of nations. The authority to launch does not belong to the captain alone. It is split between two independent officers with multiple layers of authentication and verification. But the burden of readiness, the knowledge that a single mistake could ripple out on a global scale, sits in the command chair. I have run through those missile drill checklists, hands steady on the console, knowing that the process is designed to be both foolproof and relentless. During a casualty drill, alarms blare, lights shift to red, and every crew member moves with practiced precision. The captain must decide, sometimes in seconds, whether a fire in the missile compartment is contained, whether a reactor anomaly is a false alarm or a genuine threat, whether to surface or stay hidden. There is no room for error, no time for second guessing. The entire strategic posture of a nation and the safety of every soul on board compress into those moments. That is the lived burden of deterrence. The pressure is constant, the stakes are absolute, and the only way through is discipline, training, and the quiet knowledge that you are trusted with the ultimate responsibility. The next generation of ballistic missile submarines is being shaped by lessons learned from years of operating in tight quarters, with mixed crews and unyielding mission demands. New hulls are designed from the outset with modular berthing, movable bulkheads, and gender-neutral pods that can be reconfigured between patrols. On the latest Virginia class and the planned Columbia class, each bunk has a privacy partition and dedicated storage, eliminating the trade-offs that dogged the retrofits of older boats. These are not just token upgrades. They mean a sailor can claim a rack as their own for the duration of a patrol, without sacrificing space for critical supplies or emergency gear. I have seen the difference firsthand. Morale and professionalism both rise when a crew is not fighting for inches or privacy. Lighting is another quiet revolution. Circadian-aligned LEDs now shift color temperature throughout the day, simulating dawn, midday, and dusk, even 200 meters below the surface. This technology, tested in the last 5 years, helps regulate sleep cycles and cognitive performance, pushing average rest closer to 7 hours in a 24-hour period. For a captain, that means sharper decision-making and fewer errors creeping in during the long haul. Engineering teams are also integrating noise-dampening materials and improved air circulation, cutting decibel levels at the pillow and keeping CO2 below 800 parts per million. Looking ahead, navies are projecting these human factor gains into doctrine and design. The Columbia class is scheduled to enter service in the early 2030s, with fully modular living spaces and digital watch schedules that adapt in real time to crew fatigue data. The Royal Navy's Dreadnought class is following suit, building in gender-neutral facilities and dynamic lighting as standard. These changes are not about accommodation for its own sake. They are about maximizing the operational edge. When a captain, regardless of gender, can focus on the mission instead of fighting the environment, the entire deterrent force stands stronger. The culture is maturing alongside the hardware. What once required workarounds and policy debates is becoming routine. That is the real evolution, designing submarines and their crews for the realities they actually face, not the assumptions of the past. Right now, there are women commanding U.S. Ohio-class and U.K. Vanguard-class submarines, with crews of 130 to 155, berthing lockers barely 2 feet wide, and a reactor less than 30 meters from their rack. Operational standards demand psychological steadiness, not slogans. Integration isn't about headlines, it is about who is ready to lead when sunlight is a memory and responsibility weighs several megatons. That reality shapes deterrence and the future of every patrol.